Welcome to Fun and Games Side Quests. Every episode is a different host sharing a video game they love and why they love it.
Hello, Fun and Games podcast listeners. My name is Ben, and I host a podcast called Dragoon Effect. It's an audio-only Let's Play podcast that cares about your mental health. In the very first episode, I probably overshare about myself, but it was so raw and authentic that I had to include it, and it's probably the thing people have spoken to me the most about, so I'm glad it's made a connection in that way. In general, I try to bring some inspirational quotes or some ideas or just talk about mental health in general because it's super important and it's something that we all need to take care of and we probably all need to be better at. It's something that we can easily let slip to the side. I have played a bunch of games so far, including some that have been talked about on side quests. So if you want to hear or re-experience one of these video games that I've played, check out my channel. I've done both Alan Wake's, I've done both Hellblade games, and a slew of other things with a good variety, and most of them I try to steer towards some kind of mental health allocation. I hope to see you over there. But today, I get to talk about my favorite game of all time. This game is Final Fantasy VIII, which I know you know because you read the titles of episodes. I do it too, but it doesn't matter. Gotta mention it, gotta make sure it's clear. I absolutely adore Final Fantasy VIII. This is a game I have played at least 20 times through. The first time I played it, I was over at my friend's house who had a PlayStation 1 at the time, and I didn't. And he's like, hey, let's play this game that my parents got me called Final Fantasy VIII. And it was pretty cool, but he wasn't really into it much. And about a year later, I ended up getting a PlayStation, and I said, hey, you had Final Fantasy VIII. Would you be willing to sell it to me? And he's like, sure, yeah, for like $20. And I was like, cool. I have no idea if that was a good price at the time, if I could have found it cheaper. But yeah, he's my friend. I wasn't going to try to scam him. He wasn't going to try to scam me. So then I ended up spending so much time with this game. And it hit for me at exactly the right moment. It hit when I was going through a very, not necessarily difficult time in my life, but a point in my life where I was trying to understand and figure out who I was and what was real, what was socially acceptable, what were areas where I needed to grow up and mature, or what were areas that society was incorrectly telling me were inappropriate. And it's this story of 17 and 18-year-olds. So they were, about 5 years older than me at the time, I think. They're going through something similar, but in a very different world, because our characters are mercenaries. Not at the very start. They are in school, but it's a school for mercenaries, and it starts with this amazing orchestral opening not FMV, just cutscene. I don't know why I said FMV. This amazing cutscene with music that anytime it comes on, just like happy tears stream from my face. And you've got your main character, Squall, training with his frenemy, Cypher. And they both use these things called gun blades, which is a gun and a sword. And so when you slash somebody, you pull the trigger and it also shoots them for extra damage. And they're sparring, and then it gets a little out of hand. And Cypher ends up slashing Squall and leaving a cut across his face and a scar, and Squall ends up slashing Cypher. And the next thing you know, after the end of this glorious cutscene where they're throwing words and messages at you about the game and about the future and about things that you're going to learn more about, you You wake up in the infirmary. You don't really know what's going on. It's an interesting place to wake up for sure, because Squall knows what's going on, but you're trying to figure it out. Your teacher, Quistis, shows up and is just like, I can't believe you two were letting your sparring get out of hand. And of course, you had to do it on the day of your big exam, didn't you? She basically lends you through some of the basics and the tutorials, and you go and do your first big boss fight with her. And that lets you qualify in order to take the main exam. Well, the main exam is a mercenary mission where you're sent out to this island across the sea, and you get in a boat with your teams, and it just feels like this absolutely epic setup for the story. And you are on a team where Cypher is your team's commander. And, you butt heads a little bit, but he is your commander in this situation, so you do need to listen. And so you follow his orders until he gets restless and says, okay, we're going to go do this other thing, even though it wasn't what we were told. Well, you've got to follow. He's your commander. So then you start to get pictures of the story that will come in the future. So it's the first time you play it, you don't really know what's happening. But when you play it a second or a third time, you pick up on the little things like, oh my gosh, I understand. And so they tell this story of the whole world as if the world is going on and existing by itself. If you wandered into another country, the people there aren't just going to stop and only be talking about you and your day or the events that literally only just transpired. They've got a history. They've got a society. They've got potentially ways that they're trying to figure out how to make money and just survive. And so you're not a concern to them. And so they'll be talking to each other about ongoing events. And it just felt so realistic to me at the time that it was like these different cities you end up traveling to have just their own history. Just like when I have moved to different places, looking back, it ties out pretty well. So the story advances, and there's a whole lot to delve into. So I'm going to try and keep it brief and spoilers to a minimum. But there was this big war like 20 years ago, and the people without magical powers imprisoned this great and powerful sorceress because they couldn't figure out a way to defeat her fully. And even if they did, her powers get transferred to another person. And so there's the concern that, the next person will also be strong and evil. And so if they just imprison her body, her magical powers can't be transferred. You end up going on a journey across the whole planet. You go to outer space. Your main character, Squall, and ends up meeting this character named Renoa, and all of Squall's friends keep trying to push them together to date. And Squall is like, he is like the embodiment of what I was at like 12 years old, of whatever, I don't care, sure, just apathetic. But he keeps getting pushed into a leadership position. He keeps getting pushed into situations by his friends. And eventually, somehow, he starts to see it. He starts to grow up. He starts to mature. He starts to accept that feelings are okay. He starts to heal from the trauma of his childhood, which we get to see a little bit about. He starts to show just how important mental health can be. And you don't want to just shove everything down. You don't want to just suppress it. That's not healthy. You need to work through it. You need to grieve. You need to be angry. You need to be happy. You need to do something besides just being apathetic. And so at this point in my life where I'm uncertain of basically everything, and society really hasn't grown out of toxic masculinity at the time, I mean, to be fair, there's still a lot of it today, but we've come a long way in 20 years. Seeing this, going through this, experiencing this, connecting to the characters, seeing how the characters connect to each other, seeing the secrets and the world, finding these mysteries that even your characters don't know anything about. There's a time where you return home to your main school after doing a mission, and there is a full-blown civil war going on. The students are fighting over being loyal to the headmaster and basically the financer of this school. And Squall's like, I don't know who this other guy even is, because he's never shown up. He's never come up. It's literally like that meme where Donald Glover walks into the burning apartment holding pizzas and is like, nope, gonna turn around here. I don't know what I just walked into. But you figure it out, and it helps Squall grow as both a person and a leader. And that's just this whole incredible arc that says so much. Even though there are parts that you could nitpick this whole game apart and say there are stories that they don't make a whole lot of sense, or they didn't develop the story enough. And this game was made in a year. So yeah, there's probably going to be some little holes in it like that. But that's okay, because they still made this world, and they didn't make a game that just shoves down every single thing and every single mystery down your throat with an explanation for everything, because that's not life. We have plenty of unresolved storylines in our lives that we never see the end of. We never get to know the end of. Things that we think about years down the line to say, I wonder whatever happened to so-and-so. So to me, it's okay that there are parts of the story that could have used more refinement. It adds to the charm for me. On top of this wonderful story, there's a thing called the junction system, which to me has been the greatest equipment version of any Final Fantasy. You increase the number of spells you have by drawing from enemies or draw points, and then you can assign that to buff a statistic. So if you put fire magic at your strength, you'll hit people harder. You can also add them to elemental damage, so you can make it so your sword always hits with fire damage if you want. And yes, it does dissuade you from using magic, but at the same time, they have some of the best summons of any Final Fantasy. They call them Guardian Forces, and you don't cast them instantly. There's a countdown timer, and while the countdown timer is going after you've selected it, they take damage if you're hit. So they have their own HP pool, and you can cast them over and over and over because they cast no magic points or anything like that. There are no magic points in the game. There's just number of spells and unlimited GFs. And some of them are just so cool to see, because you will see them over and over and over again. And they knew you would. So they added a function that you can teach them, at least the damage dealing ones, called Boost, where you hold select, this is back on the PS1 controller, and you tap square until it says you can't. And if you tap it when you can't, your multiplier goes back down to 1. But you can get it all the way up to, I think, 250? It might be more than that. It's been a while since I've really tried to do it, because nowadays I play the remastered version and just throw on God mode so I can just live in and revel in and just love the game without having to worry about some of the more pesky bits, let's say. And so it's this risk-reward system, so you don't get sick of seeing the summons come, because it's an active battle event every time you summon one. I love Final Fantasy VIII. It has been my favorite game for over 20 years, and I have no idea how anything could really eclipse it, because We seem to have moved away from storytelling like this. Or maybe it just hit me at exactly the right point in time where I really needed it. And where I'm at now in life, that's probably never going to happen again. Maybe someday, now I'm jinxing myself, but maybe there's a day in the future where I'm grieving over the loss of someone and I come across a game that deals with grief and helps me get through it. And so it catapults to the top. It could happen. Games that speak to me, speak to people, are some of my favorite games. I've got so many memories with video games, and somehow I always come back to Final Fantasy VIII. It's everything that I love, and I'm very surprised after over 350 episodes of side quests that nobody has talked about this. So thank you to my friends who have done other episodes, like Troy from Troidal Power and Deej from Happy Created Inc. They kind of got me to know about this and submit my love of Final Fantasy VIII for you to hear. If you haven't played it, I hope you find some time and give it a chance. You can find it on sale with the remastered version pretty regularly, and you can run through it pretty quickly thanks to the enhancements that they put into that game, like 4x speed and basically God mode, etc., etc. And if you have played it before, and maybe you didn't like it, I know a lot of people that didn't like it for various reasons, and most of them are valid. There are some I've heard that are not. I'm not going to get into that. But maybe this will help you understand why some people love this game and potentially reconsider it or potentially try it again with different eyes. Thank you for having me on. Thank you for spending your time listening to me. I hope you come over and listen to some Dragoon Effect. Every season is a different game, and we have done a bunch of seasons. So find a game you like, jump on in, and happy gaming.
In a world where there's often 60 plus years of history to worry about, how can you quickly get into a new comic character or franchise? If you're like me, then you turn to video games. But how well does that work out? In some cases, pretty well. In others, it's a giant disaster. But how can you know which games will set you on the right path and which games will just leave you more confused than you were before? Play Comics is the show for you. I'm Chris, and each episode we take a look at video games based on comic properties and how well they stick to that source material. So listen in and get the scoop on which games are worth your time over at playcomics.com or wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.